take off, and it takes fully a generation to recover. But we shouldn't be despondent as Africans because it took Europe 2 generations to recover after the European Civil War. So we've got recovery slightly faster. That picture perhaps would serve as the single illustration for the whole talk. And it deals with issues that, again, have been absent from many of the presentations thus far, because people seem to have been reluctant to talk about the emerging rivalries among the BRICS. All 5 BRICS are active in Africa. It's the playing ground. And the dark arrows represent the resource extractors. China and India out to the east. Russia should read the arrows in a slightly wrong direction. Apology to my Russian colleagues. To the European Union and the US, which are old directions. But Brazil is active in Angola as a resource extractor. You'll notice that I don't criticize South Africa as a resource extractor because it has become, its mining industry is so globalized that much of it is foreign owned now. And so it's difficult to say, is Johannesburg extracting the wealth? It's really London, Zurich, and New York. The green arrows are the other resource extraction, which is our people, going to the United States and the EU. When the EU set the the Lisbon agenda, talking about a 3% spend of GDP on research and development, it meant finding an additional 500,000 researchers. Well, where on earth would they come from? Because Europeans are no longer breeding researchers, they've got to come from somewhere else. In the US, 1/3 of Nigeria's trained doctors are in the US and so on. But South Africa is the odd one out here, and you'll see that there are different arrows and they're pointing in different directions. Firstly, these green arrows going down, that is the role of South Africa as the higher education hub of Africa. It's an enormously important base for training postdoctoral students. 8% of our university's postgraduate students are from elsewhere in Africa. And the second, which I'll speak to very quickly, those arrows in blue going north, that is services. So South Africa plays the role, as our President Zuma states, as the gateway to Africa. And I just want to jump 2 slides. South African brands are everywhere. The terrible Nairobi siege, the shops in the Nairobi Mall that were gutted, many of them are South African brands. South Africa is more than just a trading, a retail or a banking or insurance service provider. It is also the provider of the Southern African Power Pool, which extends all the way up to Zaire. So there are elements at work that counter an image of Africa as a rather gloomy, if not doomed, continent. I want to just go back to the FDI flows. These are very important, of course, because with the establishment of stronger governance, although some of the countries listed in that slide are hardly paragons of virtue, the flow of FDI, in order to get at the resources of the continent, has increased dramatically. The largest single source of FDI, of course, comes from China. But in terms of China's own FDI export, it's small. It's less than 8% of Chinese FDI. China's FDI is mainly into its own backyard. So China is number 1 into Africa. South Africa is number 2. And the last column, if you scan very quickly, gives you the ratio of inward FDI to GDP and gives you a sense of the relative importance of FDI in actually pulling economies forward. The next one reminds us of the terrible legacy of dependence in Africa, and the dependence on overseas development assistance continues to the present, and it is of the same order as the FDI. So it makes you wonder, if we are to develop innovation systems, higher education systems in Africa, where on earth is the money to come from? A lot of it comes from FDI, but there has to be another source, and that is to somehow get a better share, a better deal on the resources that are being exported. Many of the countries are extremely fast growing. Past estimates were that in the decade up to 2010, 7 of the fastest growing economies in the world were in Africa, and in the next 5 years it was expected it could be even stronger. Of course, the financial crisis has mitigated that optimism somewhat. Other good signs: there's an improvement in the ease of doing business index, there's an improvement in the corruption index of Transparency International, and one may note in passing at the bottom, South Africa is third in the world, according to the World Economic Forum, for financial market development. And that's again another reason why South Africa is so important as a BRICS nation in Africa. It's the financial gateway. Alongside this, you have the transition from the Organization of African Unity to the African Union, the very strong role played by South Africa in that process through previous President Mbeki, the establishment of the new Partnership for African Development, the introduction of the African Period Mechanism, many good initiatives trying to bring macroeconomic stability and good governance to Africa in the hope and the expectation that this would somehow improve its economic lot. A strong return to the notion of the developmental state, and then coupled with that, resource nationalism. The way that resource nationalism gets expressed is particularly through the control of royalties and exploration rights. In South Africa, we had 5 years ago the introduction finally of mining legislation that confers all minerals below the ground into the property of the people. It was, in fact, as my colleague Sultan mentions, a key element of the Freedom Charter of 1956. The resources shall belong to the people. They now do belong to the people. How the rights are allocated is critical, and what royalty level you levy is also critical, and what you do with it is critical. The other countries listed, I sense my time is evaporating, have all recently begun to renegotiate their contracts with the multinationals with whom they engage in exploitation of minerals, because they do not have their own domestic agencies that have the expertise to pursue it alone. South Africa does. Botswana now does. And I include Botswana as an exemplar of a country that, through skillful political leadership, was able to renegotiate its royalty deal with De Beers to the point that De Beers has now transferred most of its diamond operations from London to Gaborone in Botswana. This idea of being able to renegotiate is built into the African mining vision of the African Union. No, thank you. I'll do my best. Like everyone else, I will do my best. Building the innovation systems is the major goal of the Consolidated Plan of Action for Science and Technology of the African Union. I'm going to skip it, and I'm going to be very quick on this. This was an exercise of the African Science and Technology Indicators Initiative to try and begin the process of quantifying what is actually happening with the research and innovation systems of the various countries. And what stands out, of course, sorry, I must get the laser, is the dominance of South Africa. This is the total spend in PPP dollars, $1 million, on research and development. You can see in most countries it's not happening, and most African countries could not even provide data to be included in this scheme. So there are slightly desperate times. This brings me to the BRICS. What is the possibility for the BRICS to engage in scientific collaboration? We talk collaboration in this meeting with Africa. And so the next two tables, with Eduardo's permission, let me spend just a little bit more than 2 minutes on, if I may. The first one looks at inter-BRICS scientific collaboration. You will not have seen it before, I'm sure. This is measured in the way that people in the social sciences hate, namely by looking at publication counts as logged on the Web of Science. Sorry, it's the only game we've got. You can't look anywhere else. There's no other way to do it. You can look at Elsevier Scopus if you want, but it is subject to exactly the same critique. So this is the best we can do. And what is interesting to me to discover is how little collaboration there is among the 5 BRICS. And curiously, let me explain what the data mean. In boldface, you have the total number of scientific publications in the year 2012. And in brackets, you've got the percentage for each country pair. And you'll see that the country that is collaborating the most is little South Africa. It has the strongest internationalization of its science in the 5 BRICS. Okay, so that's point number 1. Now we go to the BRICS with Africa, because we in the BRICS, we are so committed to helping our African cousins. Therefore, we expect to find lots and lots of scientific collaboration, right? Wrong. There are the publication counts for country pair collaborations. Brazil with Egypt, 131. China with Tunisia, 19. I'm just picking out at random. And among the BRICS, the country with the strongest collaborations is, in fact, China. But it is also the biggest player. It's the biggest country, the largest number of scientists, in the sense you would expect it. But the other thing you see, and that's what is circled in red, is the power of history and colonialism. So the strongest external collaboration with African countries, Egypt with the United States, Tunisia with La Belle France, where else? Language matters. Morocco, the same as France. Kenya with England and the United States, and South Africa, England and the United States. So, in a sense, the data says, wake up. There's work to be done. It's cheap to talk about collaboration. It's much more difficult to do it. It isn't happening. There, of course, is scientific collaboration that is not captured through scientific publications. There are collaborations, there are reports, there are consultancies, there's work with the multilateral organizations. It doesn't appear here. So there is more than this table shows. But it shows it's very low anyway. So you have to get going. The last point, leveraging the resource rent.